I would like to ask Christiane Eberhardt for some comments. Yes, our associated and supportive partner. Yes. Yes, you have to be ready.
I'm not prepared to that. But first, let me thank you for getting the opportunity to take part in the meeting. I'm Christiane. I'm from the Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training in Germany. And it is very interesting because as longer I listen to your discussions, as more questions I get, and sometimes as more confused I get as well, because it's so interesting to listen to your approaches, which, in my opinion, mirror exactly the systems themselves, whether it's a market-driven system, whether it's a state-driven system, whether it's a full-time schooling vet system or not. And sometimes I'm sitting like that saying, and there is a lack, there is no system like mine, where you say it's a corporatist system where the players are involved in a certain way. So when it comes to the typology that you introduced, it was very interesting, but it would be nice if you also have a kind of typology for those state-recognized qualifications that are neither provided only by the educational system nor by the state, but perhaps by the labor market. Today there is an event at the CEDEFOP in Thessaloniki, and sometimes
do not mention it.
No, but I Twitter. Look, I Twitter it. So this.
Okay. Even worse.
No,
I will tell you why.
No, I will tell you that I'm very happy to be here. But Mr. Kalea said 7 hours ago, and now comes quotation, the EQF makes a difference to people's lives. He would, I doubt for the German case at the moment, and this is what I want to mention or to comment. I think let's just do one step after another, because sometimes we want to do everything with the qualification framework. We want to use it as a means for designing new qualifications. We want to use it as a means in order to enhance the European mobility. We want to use it as a classification. We want to use it as a means for inner educational progression. Or is it, and that's what I think is important, what is the most important thing for the qualification, for the respective national qualification system and framework? And sometimes I doubt. It is not like entering a shop where you say, oh, I grab a bit from the Ireland framework, and then I take a bit of the Polish ingredients, and I make it a German system. That doesn't fit. The qualification framework has to fit our systems and our demands. And this is, for me, very important thing. So therefore, just let me say that in Germany, and our system is as it is, but we are now working 10 years on the qualification framework. Our qualification, at the moment we are discussing the legislative consequences. It's not, so to say, a voluntary framework, but of course it's differently. We don't talk about quality assurance because the qualifications are assured in the very moment they are developed, because they are national standards. So I don't want to bother you with too many things. I just want to say I really like Horace's approach at the very beginning, because sometimes it seems to me as on one hand we do have European glossaries, but the very moment we want to work with the European glossaries, we have again to work a new glossary in order to understand each other, and that starts with qualification. Is it a profession? So here we are quite close to the French approach. Is it just a short qualification of 6 months? Then it would, in our understanding, be a partial qualification because it leads to a full qualification. We never know if we don't have occasions now, like now, where we really can sit and discuss that. And therefore, and that's the last thing what I want to mention, I think on one hand, let's take our time to work it out and to, like you do, to describe it in order to make also to make sure about the differences. And then let's also make some, put time and efforts in research. Because I really like I think it is very important that we check whether it's really the case that European mobility or that qualification frameworks help in recognizing foreign qualifications. That is a statement and an hypothesis, and it would be really nice to see or to discover in which countries and how one can use a qualification framework also for those purposes, because sometimes I think we sometimes work too much on two different tools instead of creating synergies between all that's already existing.
Thank you very much, Christina. And Alan, would you like to compliment or to say to comment? Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Ellen Hazelcorn here from Dublin. I think I probably want to follow on with some comments that you've made and also some comments from my colleague, Anne Murphy. I like to think I guess I work in a policy frame, so I like to look at 10-year horizons. If you look at how long it's taken people to develop qualifications frameworks, they're a long process. And by the time you get to the end, lots of things have moved on. And so I always think in education you need to look at a longer time horizon. So I expect the question is where is all this going? And what is the world going to be like over the next 10 years? So Anne talked about mobility of people, and I think that's just part and parcel of the world we're in. I guess I like to think of in the context of my grandchildren, who are obviously very young, will live into the next century. So that world is a very different place than we're now. And how are we preparing that in the context of the tools that we have? And are we too caught up with, I think Anne's expression was, and we didn't discuss this beforehand, shining up particular elements. So I look at quality assurance, where I'm actually doing a lot of that work, and we're moving beyond that quite considerably. The question of transparency and accountability is a big issue. Then we move on to qualifications frameworks at a national level, but that's not adequate either. So we need to look at what is increasingly transnational and what are the common components that enable higher education to operate internationally. And it seems to me we need to be thinking about those sorts of issues and how we move that on and that conversation on. And the second comment is about the context of the non-formal and the informal, and that to me is again a reflection of the changing nature of the educational system in general, post-compulsory, post-secondary, however one wants to call it, increasing massification, diversity of students, and the necessary inclusion of a whole range of people who we never thought of before. And how well are we doing that? And are we doing it fast enough? And so I was interested in the French example, which attempted to describe in a longitudinal way how things had happened in response to particular drivers. And again, that kind of discussion, I think, would be useful to put all this in a context. Otherwise, there's a danger of going down a rabbit hole.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Alan, for this comment. And so let us go back to complete the question regarding the quality. In what directions do you think we will go? To be more heavier or lighter, or no trend? Mile?
Well, thank you. Well, if we are looking from the perspective of the European qualifications framework and the implementation of national qualifications framework according to the EQF recommendations, I think it's clear that we are going to more strict quality assurance systems. Well, we can read from Annex 3 from the previous recommendation to Annex 4 of the new recommendation, and I think we are able to find more strict elements. And also in higher education specifically, we can read from well, comparing two European standards and guidelines for quality assurance in higher education. I mean, previous one before 2015 and new one. Well, they are more explicit, requiring very explicitly that external quality assurance agencies in specific countries should be even externally evaluated and be part of the European register, etc., etc. Well, this is, from that perspective. But of course, there are, pros and cons for both sides. Having a very strict quality assurance, but also very weak. Always there are positive, negative elements. But I would like, in addition to share with you, at least my understanding. Maybe I am wrong, but I would just in brief would like to show you my understanding regarding the national qualifications frameworks. Well, I understand that qualifications framework are not just registers. Register of quality assured qualifications. Maybe this is quite important part, but there are many other tools within national qualifications frameworks, small elements we are able to use, at very individual level or at institutional level, provider levels, or even, ministry level or national level, even international level, different countries together. Well, individually, as students, as individual people, I think we can use very effectively some of elements of the national qualifications framework. For example, for how to write our CV. CVs to be well, recognized, understandable for other people. When we are applying for a job, writing projects or whatever. Or even if we are on other side at the labor market, level, probably we could better explain what we really need. By using some of elements, for example, level descriptors, learning outcomes elements, even credit system, etc. So why not to use those tools? At this individual or institutional level, and to have some benefits at such points. Yeah. So I think this could be even a part of the answer to the lady, regarding the IT skills. So why not, if me as a person, so I have, let's say, formal qualification, but old one, without, clear written statements that formally I have some IT sector level competencies. So why not to express, me, myself in my CVs, showing, very effectively by using knowledge and skills we are able to, and level descriptors to show, to write it, and even to find a kind of documentations, not real qualifications, but a kind of documentations showing that effectively I have been working in, different elements, developing something, some programs, etc. So this is, I think, those small elements, those small tools within national qualifications framework, if we want, we are able to use at individual level, at institutional level, different labor market, education, ministry level, etc. But of course, I understand, well, quite important part are registers, but this is my understanding. This is not the only, this is, very, let's say, higher level element, but this, to me, it's not the only element. So as a member of the one university, and we are thinking, well, now to create some new non-formal programs for our students, well, to give them opportunities for new knowledge skills, but without any kind of, certification, just giving them opportunity to learn something we think could be, important and helpful for their lives later.
Thank you, Mile. Okay, Zoltan, yes?
Yeah. 3 short remarks I like to make. The first is is connected what Mila said, so that qualification framework can be used for different purposes, the elements. And they are, and they are the universal elements, and they can be used for different purposes. I mean, as a guidance to right learning outcomes, small pieces of the framework can be applied at institutional planning, etc., so that we should not look at the framework as a universal solution to all kinds of things. In my vision, that framework, I'm terribly sorry to refer to the forest metaphor that sticks in my mind, so that I look at the framework as a compass. But if you want to cross the forest, the compass sometimes doesn't enough. So that we should have a map as well. So that so the elements what an applicable qualification framework consists of, that can be used for different purposes. The first remark. The second is the digital competencies. I don't know the answer, but we encountered this kind of issue or question at home. How can we link or compare or something like that the digital competence framework with a qualification framework? So let me generalizing that kind of question. How we can assure the linkage between a competence framework which is different in nature than a qualification framework. What kind of elements a qualification framework can pose as a useful instrument to make a connection between the two. And the third is the right balance in the quality assurance. I'm not a quality assurance expert. Zoltán is it. He did it for more than 15 years in Hungary. So it's really a tricky question to find the right balance. And I think the European Union turned back to not really a good direction when the new EQF recommendation supplemented with this annex something with quality assurance principles, because originally the idea for the EQF was to make non-formal learning and non-formal qualifications more comparable and visible, and include that into a framework. A lot of European Union countries were not prepared at that time to do that. So the direction made a turn to more a formal aspect, and a lot of European Union member states implemented qualification framework or developed their qualification framework, which was much more a response to the formal qualifications. And they left this kind of non-formal papers and qualifications out of the focus. That was our case as well. So that now the quality assurance principle in the new recommendations are, as Horace mentioned, quite strict, and I think, and that's much, this is more for, formal education system than the non-formal learning setting. If you want, I don't believe qualification in one country at same level can be compared. So that the primary school leaving certificate in Hungary, that's the basic qualification, and almost everybody gets it after finishing primary school. But the PISA results of the 15 years old are very different. More than 20% of the students are under the second literacy level. That means they are functionally analphabet, but they have the qualification, the same qualification as those students who have scored level 5 or level 4. So that's, I think, the comparison and the value of a qualification not in all cases can be solved by quality assurance. And the main question for me relating to the quality and the procedures and criteria to assure the quality is somehow the trust, the value and the interest. And this connects to the last question, probably Horace would raise that. So how we would follow our cooperation, so that I think the main interest in our institution is to look at more deeply the trust, the value and the interest of a framework question.
Thank you, Zoltan, for this really valuable, extensive comment. And could we go to Sheila to learn your opinion in what directions we will go regarding quality? The Scottish systems, they seem to be lighter than in some other countries. Or maybe it is just the surface.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a different quality assurance system or systems in place because of our devolved system within our framework. So we've got a range of different quality assurance systems in different sectors. I think when we talk about our framework and our credit rating bodies, we also have a range within that. So some of our credit rating bodies that have been working with us for a long time, such as the Chartered Institute of Bankers, who are one of our very first credit rating bodies who weren't a college or a university. They had very strict quality assurance. We reviewed them very strictly at the beginning. But now that they've been doing that for a number of years, we've lightened up the process. And I think we've got a sort of system which is quite common across Scotland of self-evaluation by institutions. So institutions are experienced in evaluating what they do themselves and then submitting the reports to the quality bodies, who then look at that. So a lot of the responsibility for ensuring the quality has been put onto the institutions and the bodies themselves, and it's a process that they are now much more used to being very self-critical about what they do. So I think our quality assurance systems, we've got a range. So some of the institutions that are very new to the process have quite a strict level of quality assurance. Some of the other institutions that have proved their level of quality assurance and they're trusted and they've demonstrated the quality assurance of their qualifications and their programmes do get that bit lighter touch. So I think it's back to one of the points I said before, it's very much what suits your system. You can't take something from another country and just fly it into your system and hope it works. It's got to be something that fits your own needs. I mean, I think the other thing that Mealy touched on about using your framework for lots of other things rather than just a register. We've developed things like an employer toolkit where we've contextualised our level descriptors to be used by employers. So it comes maybe a little bit about the issue about IT skills. So we've produced a toolkit that shows employers if they take on someone that has got a certain level of qualification, their qualifications in the framework, so it's at level 5, then it says to them what this person should be capable of doing, the level of IT skills they might have, the capability of working with others, of making decisions. And I think employers have found that useful and helped to bring them into working with the framework, but not just about register and putting levels and credits on things. It's about how can you use those level descriptors in other aspects. We're encouraging employers in Scotland not to ask for specific qualifications quite often in job adverts, but to advertise for people qualified to SCQF level 9 or level 6, and to look at a range of qualifications. So we've sort of widened out what our framework will do. And just a final point about the IT skills. One of the things that we've done in Scotland, that all our school leavers, when they're leaving education, we only have one awarding body for school qualifications, the Scottish Qualifications Authority, and every learner gets a core skills profile, which tells them the level and the framework that they have of certain competencies of working with others, communication, numeracy, IT, and they get that along with their school certificates. They get that core skills profile to take to any employer. So that's another aspect that the framework has been used. And I think, maybe to answer the lady from Ireland, is that we don't ever see an end to our framework. You know, we're 16 years down the line and we're still working at it. We're still encouraging people to be involved, and we don't really envisage that the work will ever be done, because as the world develops and countries develop, then your framework needs to develop along with those changes.
Okay, thank you. And yes, let's finish this part of the conference with this nice touch that the frameworks they need to develop along with the systems. We have envisaged 3 more parts in the agenda and 2 more after the supper, and then we could set you free. I saw this a bit afraidness in your eyes. No, let me officially finish this part of the conference, and let me hand over to Jan, to our host.
Okay, I just wanted to say that there is we have lots to talk about it, and it's a big issue, and we will have another possibility to share our ideas in Warsaw, because there will be the final conference. It will be somewhere in May, June next year, so you all are invited there. I think it will be, I don't know, 2-day conference, so there will be more time to talk about it than here. So that's why we are closing the conference now. I have to thank IBE team, because they helped me coordinating this conference, and the Czech team who helped me to do this, and all of you who participate in the conference, my colleagues from here. And don't forget to fill out the questionnaires, and there is a box, and just put it in the box. And because we were afraid that you might be hungry, so if you leave, there is still something to eat, so grab something for your supper, maybe. And thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it here and you learned new things and so on. And see you next time. Thank you.